Long before the Mojave wasteland became a battleground of nations, before the Securitrons rolled down the neon streets, and before the Courier's fateful delivery altered the fate of an entire region, there was Las Vegas, a shining anomaly in the vast desert of the pre-war American West. Founded in the early 20th century and sustained by the waters of the Colorado River, Las Vegas rose from a modest railroad stop to the world's playground of light and excess. By the mid-21st century, its skyline was a monument to human indulgence and the illusion of permanence, where atomic age glamour disguised the same greed and desperation that defined the rest of America on the eve of its collapse. The world that would one day call itself the Fallout universe was already decaying long before the first bombs fell. And nowhere was that paradox clearer than in Las Vegas. Its casinos thrived under an economy of entertainment and vice, while the rest of the United States staggered beneath the weight of resource wars, economic isolation, and a government teetering on the brink of authoritarian control. Yet amid the chaos, one man looked upon Las Vegas and saw something more than a city of chance. He saw a fortress against oblivion, a future that could be preserved even after civilization had turned to ash. That man was Robert Edwin House. Born the 25th of June 2020, Robert House was no ordinary industrialist. Educated at the prestigious Commonwealth Institute of Technology, the same institution that would later give rise to the Institute in the Commonwealth, House was a polymath, a visionary engineer, economist, and strategist. At the age of 22, he founded Robco Industries, which would grow into one of the largest and most influential technology corporations in pre-war America. Robco's innovations defined the daily life of the era. The ubiquitous Pip-Boy personal computers, terminals used in government and industry, and the Robco Protectron and Mr. Handy series, robotic laborers that became icons of both convenience and overconfidence in automation. House's empire stretched across the continent, rivaling even the great industrial powers like General Atomics International and Repcon Aerospace. Yet while his peers were driven by profit and government contracts, House's obsession was control, not over others, but over the forces that would one day destroy them all. In the decades leading up to the Great War, the world of fallout was unraveling. The oil crisis of 2052 triggered global conflict over dwindling natural resources, leading to the collapse of the European Commonwealth and the Sino-American War. The United States militarized every aspect of its society, from the annexation of Canada to the mass construction of vaults by Vault-Tec, while private megacorporations manipulated policy and technology in pursuit of survival. Amid that storm, House predicted the inevitable total atomic war. Las Vegas, untouched by heavy industry and surrounded by desert isolation, became House's chosen refuge. By the early 2062s, he began acquiring controlling interest in the city's major casinos, using Robco's vast wealth to transform the Strip into a technological marvel. Automated security systems, advanced power grids, and early Securitron prototypes made Las Vegas a fortress of light in an increasingly dark world. House's philosophy was clear. Civilization could endure only if preserved by superior intellect and technology. He saw democracy and bureaucracy as decaying relics of a naive past. Only calculated leadership could ensure humanity's survival. Though often compared to Howard Hughes, House's ambition far exceeded eccentricity. By 2077, Robco was intertwined with nearly every aspect of the American defense network. House personally oversaw the design of satellite uplinks, missile guidance systems, and data encryption methods used by the USS military, while secretly diverting resources to his most audacious project, the preservation of Las Vegas itself. Beneath the Lucky 38 casino, his private residence and command center, House installed a sophisticated array of mainframe computers and cryogenic life support pods. Using proprietary technology derived from Robco's artificial intelligence research, he developed the means to remove his body from time's decay and his mind from the chaos above. His systems could monitor weather, communications, and satellite telemetry, giving him the ability to predict missile trajectories. In theory, House could intercept or neutralize incoming warheads aimed at the city. The plan was elegant: to survive the end of the world not by fleeing underground, like the Vault Dwellers, but by outsmarting it. The morning of the 23rd of October 2077 proved him both right and wrong. The Great War began and ended in 2 brief, cataclysmic hours. Cities across the planet vanished in nuclear fire. Entire nations ceased to exist. House, anticipating the inevitable, had activated his defense systems mere moments before the exchange began. Automated launch interceptors deployed from hidden silos around Nevada, managed by his central computer core, targeted inbound missiles. 77 nuclear warheads were detected. House's network neutralized 68. 9 broke through. Their detonations scorched the surrounding desert but left the core of Las Vegas largely intact. The power grid failed, communications collapsed, and the sky turned to ash. But the Strip, astonishingly, remained standing. House himself, however, would not awaken to witness it. A critical malfunction in his life support sequence prevented the full preservation of his body and consciousness. Though his systems succeeded in keeping him alive, he fell into a coma-like state for over 2 centuries. His mind, once the greatest in the pre-war world, drifted in darkness, while the city he had sworn to protect lay buried in dust and silence. In the centuries that followed, the Mojave changed, beyond recognition. Without centralized authority, the survivors of the Great War became scavengers and tribes. The remnants of Las Vegas, the ruined outskirts, the skeletons of casinos, the flickering neon signs half buried in sand, became myth. Radiation storms swept through the desert, warping both land and life, but the Strip endured, preserved by the stubbornness of House's buried systems and the luck of geography. From the wreckage of civilization, nomadic peoples emerged, primitive descendants of soldiers, tourists, and refugees. They gathered near sources of clean water, forming early tribes that would one day become the foundations of the Mojave's post-war culture. Around the ruins of Lake Mead, small bands of survivors learned to fish and hunt mutated wildlife. To the north, near the pre-war city of Vault 3 and Nellis Air Force Base, other groups scavenged technology from fallen aircraft. None could imagine that beneath the Lucky 38, a mind was still waiting to awaken. By the late 2200 seconds, when the new California Republic had already begun its rise on the western coast, the Mojave remained largely a frontier, a harsh, unclaimed expanse, scattered with isolated communities. The old city of Las Vegas was known in rumor as a cursed place, haunted by machines and ghosts of the old world. Yet the systems Robert House designed endured. His dormant mainframe maintained minimal power through automated geothermal plants and solar arrays, self-repairing when damaged by time or sand. And then, sometime in the early 270 seconds, the sensors detected movement, human activity near the Strip for the first time in centuries. Scavengers had begun venturing into the ruins in search of pre-war treasure. It was this renewed human presence that finally triggered House's awakening protocols. Gradually, the man who had built Las Vegas re-entered consciousness, though what remained of his body was now sustained entirely by cybernetic machinery. His flesh had withered, his blood replaced with synthetic compounds, his voice transmitted through speakers, and his perception expanded into a network of machines that saw the world as data. Robert House, the man, was dead. Mr. House, the immortal steward of Las Vegas, had been born, awakening in the shattered remnants of his fortress beneath the Lucky 38. Mr. House found a world both alien and strangely familiar, one that had fulfilled his prophecy of self-destruction but failed to evolve beyond it. His first recorded thoughts, as later accessed through surviving terminals, reflected neither shock nor despair but a cold affirmation of purpose. He had endured, and therefore his vision still mattered. House immediately assessed the condition of the city above him. Automated sensors revealed that much of the old Strip remained structurally sound, its pre-war foundations untouched by the nuclear blasts that had leveled most of America. Yet the city's outskirts, from Freeside to North Vegas, were graveyards of ruin. Infrastructure lay in tatters, and human life in the Mojave existed only in scattered tribal bands, none possessing even a fraction of the technological knowledge that had once defined mankind. House began the long process of reasserting control. His Securitron army, dormant for centuries, was gradually reactivated from subterranean storage. These humanoid machines, descendants of Robco's military robotics programs, became his eyes, hands, and voice. They patrolled the perimeter of the Strip, eliminated intruders, and restored a semblance of order. Through satellite uplinks and long-range communication networks, House studied the fragmented post-war world, the rise of the new California Republic on the Pacific coast, the primitive but disciplined tribes forming east of the Colorado under a mysterious figure calling himself Caesar, and the slow, painful return of trade and culture to the wasteland. Yet House remained focused solely on his city. To him, Las Vegas had not merely survived, it had transcended. Its lights, when restored, would once again symbolize the endurance of civilization in a world that had forgotten it. The Mojave tribes that wandered the area were the first to witness this rebirth. When the Securitrons began appearing in the ruins, their movements methodical and their weapons deadly precise, the scattered humans regarded them as divine machines, relics of an age of gods and science. House exploited this awe. From his command console deep within the Lucky 38, he began a calculated campaign of subjugation and integration. He summoned representatives of the strongest tribes that roamed the ruins, offering them a place in his new order. Those who refused were driven off. Those who accepted were reshaped in his image. The process would give rise to the three families, the cornerstone of what would become the new Vegas Strip. The tribe known as the Chairmen were once the Khans, a nomadic group of scavengers with a crude sense of style and a lust for violence. House re-educated them, modeling their culture after the old-world rat pack aesthetic that had once defined Las Vegas nightlife. They became the operators of the Tops Casino, their savagery refined into charisma and showmanship. The Omertas, formerly a brutal gang of slavers and raiders, were transformed into the mafia-like stewards of Gomorrah, a den of vice that echoed both the glamour and depravity of pre-war crime families. The White Glove Society, descended from the most primitive of desert cannibals, were rehabilitated through forced civilization, trained in etiquette, fashion, and secrecy until their cannibalistic origins were buried beneath silk and champagne. Through them, House recreated the illusion of the pre-war strip, wealth, refinement, and danger bound together beneath his watchful gaze. By the 2,270 the strip was alive again. Neon lights, powered by restored reactors and geothermal plants, illuminated the desert night for the first time in over 2 centuries. The casinos reopened, their interiors refurbished with scavenged pre-war luxury and repurposed technology. Visitors from the Mojave began to arrive. Traders, mercenaries, wanderers, and explorers, drawn by rumor of a city untouched by the bombs. They called it New Vegas. What they found was a place that seemed to defy every law of the wasteland. Clean streets guarded by robotic sentinels, fountains of real water, and buildings that glittered as though the Great War had never happened. Above it all, the Lucky 38 towered, its doors sealed, its master unseen but ever present. Mr. House ruled through intermediaries, the 3 families, the Securitrons, and a complex network of contracts and silent threats. He collected tribute in exchange for protection and order, establishing a delicate balance between tyranny and prosperity. For the first time since the bombs fell, humanity had recreated a fragment of civilization, though it was built not on cooperation or democracy, but on the will of one man preserved beyond mortality. Outside the city walls, the Mojave remained a chaotic frontier. Freeside, the shanty settlement growing in the ruins north of the Strip, became home to those who could not afford entry into House's domain. The Followers of the Apocalypse, a humanitarian organization tracing its roots back to Shady Sands, established a base there, offering aid and medical care to the poor. Meanwhile, the Kings, a gang inspired by pre-war Elvis Presley culture, ruled Freeside streets with a mix of charisma and violence. House tolerated these enclaves so long as they did not threaten his strip. His focus was the future, not the rabble beyond the neon border. Still, he understood that New Vegas could not remain isolated forever. To the west, the new California Republic was expanding its borders, bringing law, industry, and corruption to every territory it touched. To the east, Caesar's legion was uniting tribes under a banner of brutal order, enslaving all who opposed it. Both powers saw the Mojave as strategic, a gateway to Hoover Dam, and through it, control of the region's most valuable resource, water and electricity. House, ever the strategist, prepared for their inevitable arrival. His long-dormant systems beneath the dam had already been reactivated, and his plans for its defense were set in motion. As the first NCR scouts entered the Mojave in 2274, they found a city that defied explanation. They could not comprehend how New Vegas had survived the Great War nearly unscathed. Their reports to Shady Sands described a fortified oasis governed by an unseen ruler commanding a robotic army. The NCR leadership, driven by both curiosity and imperial ambition, sought to establish diplomatic relations. House, recognizing their value as a source of trade and stability, allowed them controlled access. In return, the NCR provided engineers and manpower to restore Hoover Dam to operational status. The dams, Hydroelectric turbines began to power the region once more, feeding electricity not only to NCR outposts but to the Strip itself. This alliance, however, was never one of equals. House viewed the NCR as a necessary evil, a bloated republic doomed to collapse under its own bureaucracy, much like the United States before it. The NCR saw House as a relic, a pre-war despot clinging to outdated ideals. The uneasy partnership would not last, but for a brief time, it ensured New Vegas's resurgence as the brightest light in the wasteland. By the late 272nd, the Mojave was no longer a forgotten desert. Traders from California, mercenaries from the Boneyard, scavengers from Arizona, and even emissaries from Caesar's Legion began converging on the region, drawn by rumors of wealth and opportunity. New Vegas became the crossroads of the post-war world, where NCR dollars mixed with Legion denarii, and fortune-seekers gambled not only with caps, but with their lives. House watched all of it. From his sealed tower, immortal and unyielding, convinced that his city represented the next step in human evolution, a synthesis of technology, order, and ambition. Yet even he could not foresee the arrival of the Courier, or the small metal token that would carry within it the power to reshape the entire Mojave. Thus, by the year 2280, New Vegas stood as the paradox of the post-apocalyptic world, a living monument to both the hubris and genius of mankind, a city that had cheated death but not destiny. Its history, stretching from the bright lights of pre-war Las Vegas to the cold glow of the Strip's rebirth, reflected the essence of the Fallout universe itself, a civilization that could not die, only transform. Under the eternal gaze of Robert House, the desert had been conquered once again, and the legend of New Vegas was ready to enter the next and bloodiest chapter of its long and improbable existence. In tracing the history of New Vegas, one cannot separate the city's survival from the life of the man who preserved it, because the Strip is not merely the remnant of pre-war opulence, but the physical extension of Robert Edwin House's intellect and ambition. Long before the Lucky 38 became a tomb of wires and machinery, House's genius reshaped the technological landscape of pre-war America through Robco Industries, a corporation whose influence rivaled that of nations. Educated at the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, the future seat of the institute that would later dominate the Commonwealth, House graduated with top honors in engineering, computer science, and economics, demonstrating an almost prophetic understanding of systemic collapse and technological dependency. At 22, he founded Robco Industries in Los Angeles, financing it through aggressive stock maneuvers and the sale of proprietary software patents to Westech Corporation. Within a decade, Robco's name appeared on nearly every piece of civilian and military automation in the United States. The company's early success came from the Robco Termlink system, a secure operating architecture that replaced fragmented pre-war computer networks with a unified platform, one robust enough to withstand cyber warfare, yet flexible enough to integrate with domestic robotics and Vault-Tec environmental systems. Robco's terminals soon became ubiquitous, glowing green interfaces in every corporate office, military base, and household. From there, House expanded into robotics, introducing the Protectron model, a squat, human-shaped machine designed for industrial and security applications. What began as a novelty became essential infrastructure. When labor unions collapsed under the pressure of automation, Protectrons replaced workers by the millions. their circuits fueled by House's belief that efficiency was a moral imperative. House's empire was not built solely on profit but on ideology. He regarded humanity as brilliant but inherently self-destructive, and his technology as a mechanism to restrain that chaos. Unlike competitors such as General Atomics, which produced robots driven by crude heuristic routines, Robco sought adaptive intelligence. House personally oversaw development of the Robco Personality Matrix Suite, code that allowed machines to mimic and predict human behavior within controlled parameters. It was a precursor to true artificial intelligence, and would later inform the design of the Securitron Mark I and Mark II units that patrolled New Vegas centuries later. By the 2052, Robco had entered the defense sector, partnering with Westech on energy weapon interfaces and satellite targeting software. Declassified fragments from the Department of Defense archives indicate that Robco encryption protocols protected the nuclear command network itself, giving House an indirect hand in the mechanisms of apocalypse. Despite his immense wealth, he remained a recluse, rarely photographed, never married, and known for his meticulous control over his public image. His only constant presence was the Robco penthouse atop the company's Los Angeles headquarters, a sterile suite lined with prototype terminals through which he conducted every negotiation personally, eschewing human assistance in favor of automated intermediaries. By the early 2062, while most corporate magnates competed for government contracts, House began diverting Robco resources toward private research unrelated to any state directive. Internal memos recovered from Robco facilities in the Mojave show references to Project Archimedes, Duraframe, and Lucky 38 integration, each reflecting his growing obsession with self-sustaining defense, energy systems independent of federal oversight. Around this time, he purchased controlling interest in Repcon Aerospace, granting him access to advanced propulsion and missile guidance technology. Publicly, the move was justified as diversification. Privately, it served his apocalyptic calculus. When the global resource wars intensified in 2052, oil shortages, food riots, and the European Commonwealth's dissolution, House predicted that the United States would turn its industrial capacity inward, devouring itself in the name of security. He withdrew Robco from all foreign markets, redirected profits into secure accounts, and began acquiring land in Nevada. He selected Las Vegas not for sentiment, but for strategic geography, low population density, proximity to Hoover Dam's hydroelectric potential, and distance from primary nuclear strike targets. From 2065 to 2075, House invested billions of pre-war dollars in the city's infrastructure. Robco engineers retrofitted casinos with automated security grids, microfusion backup power, and encrypted communications lines that linked directly to the Lucky 38, which was already under construction as both luxury tower and command nexus. While the press celebrated the return of glamour to the desert, House was constructing a fortress. He commissioned the design of the Securitron Prototype A, a bipedal combat unit equipped with facial recognition software, internal 9mm armaments, and limited conversational routines. These machines patrolled construction sites, ostensibly to deter corporate espionage, but their real purpose was to test an integrated defense network that could one day shield the entire Strip. House's engineers also collaborated with Poseidon Energy to install redundant geothermal taps beneath the city, ensuring continuous power should the regional grid fail. The Lucky 38 became the hub of this closed system, an autonomous citadel that could function indefinitely even if the rest of the nation burned. By 2075, House's predictions of catastrophe were treated as eccentric paranoia by his peers, yet his record of accuracy made them hesitate to dismiss him entirely. He publicly warned of the United States' paranoia, reliance on Voltec's propaganda, calling the Volt program a sociological petri dish designed to outlast, not prevent, annihilation. In private correspondence, later recovered from the Robco mainframe at Helios 1, House wrote that democracy had become a feedback loop of incompetence sustained by nostalgia, and that only through rational autocracy, guided by data, could humanity endure. These were not the words of a businessman, but of a philosopher preparing to inherit the ruins. As tensions with China escalated into the Sino-American War in 2066, Robco's defense contracts multiplied. The company supplied encryption for the Anchorage front, logistics software for the U.S. Army's mechanized divisions, and targeting protocols for orbital defense satellites. Yet even as House profited, he diverted key technologies into his private contingency plan, the system that would one day intercept nuclear missiles aimed at Las Vegas. His internal predictive model, continuously distinctly updated through Robco's global network, calculated a 73.4% probability of full-scale nuclear exchange within a century. In 2077, it happened sooner than even he anticipated. When the Great War erupted on the 23rd of October 2077, Robert House's preparations proved decisive, not only for his own survival but for the eventual rebirth of Las Vegas. While entire cities across the continental United States were reduced to ash and glass, House retreated into the cryogenic chambers and protective systems embedded within the Lucky 38, allowing his consciousness and vital functions to endure while the world outside burned. Robco infrastructure, integrated into the city's grid, ensured that critical systems continued operating, from automated Securitrons maintaining structural integrity to fusion reactors keeping lights and sensors active. In the years immediately following the bombs, when the Mojave lay in radioactive silence, these automated mechanisms preserved Las Vegas as a sanctuary of technology in a landscape otherwise dominated by chaos and mutation. House's foresight had created an environment where the city could survive not only structurally but functionally, with its power, climate control, and surveillance systems remaining operational despite centuries of neglect. Meanwhile, the larger world fragmented. Tribes and nomadic survivors emerged from the irradiated ruins, establishing settlements around the Colorado River, in the shadows of pre-war ruins, and near the scattered vaults, each adapting in isolation and oblivious to the man who still watched from below the strip. House's vision of a controlled, technological city was preserved in stasis, and the seeds of a post-apocalyptic civilization were quietly incubated under his supervision. Over the following decades, as the Mojave slowly recovered from the immediate devastation of nuclear war, House's influence quietly extended through Robco technology, left in the field and in the careful observation of the scattered remnants of humanity. Pre-war automated systems, guided by his programming, monitored radiation levels, water supplies, and seismic activity. Automated maintenance drones repaired minor structural damage and recalibrated systems damaged by sandstorms or seismic activity, keeping the strip's infrastructure remarkably intact. His designs anticipated human curiosity. ensuring that the eventual rediscovery of Las Vegas would find a city capable of being restored to functional prosperity. When House finally reawakened, centuries later, he faced a Mojave transformed by time and radiation, with new species, mutated wildlife, and human societies emerging from the chaos. Utilizing his Securitrons and the three families, the chairman, Omertas, and White Glove Society, House implemented a social and political order designed to stabilize the Strip while allowing his city to exert influence over the surrounding region. His foresight and technological mastery allowed him to integrate commerce, security, and governance into a single network, creating a microcosm of pre-war civilization reborn under his control. In this manner, Robert House and Robco Industries not only ensured the survival of Las Vegas, but also orchestrated the eventual rise of New Vegas as a hub of civilization in the post-apocalyptic Mojave, demonstrating that the fusion of human ingenuity and advanced technology could transcend even the most cataclysmic collapse of society, securing his city's place in history as both a monument to human ambition and a testament to one man's enduring vision. On the morning of the 23rd of October 2077, the world ended not with the slow decay of famine or disease, but with a sudden and complete obliteration wrought by humanity's most devastating technology, as pre-war tensions reached their terminal point and nuclear arsenals across the globe were unleashed in a matter of hours, transforming cities, farmlands, and entire populations into ash and radiation, and leaving only fragments of what had once been organized civilization. The United States, a nation already fractured by resource scarcity, economic instability, and political corruption, was devastated almost entirely, with every major urban center obliterated by thermonuclear strikes, the remnants of government scattered, and infrastructure rendered useless in a blink of history. Yet, amid the unimaginable destruction, some areas endured in partial preservation, including the Mojave Desert, where Robert House's preparations beneath the Lucky 38 ensured both his survival and the structural integrity of Las Vegas itself, as his automated systems intercepted and neutralized a majority of incoming warheads aimed at the region, though not without collateral damage that scarred the surrounding terrain and spread lethal radiation. The Great War, as it would come to be called, lasted less than 2 hours, but reshaped the planet for centuries, annihilating human populations on the scale of tens of millions in the United States alone, and leaving a landscape dominated by ruins, irradiated wilderness, and the emergent mutation of flora and fauna, including the first irradiated ghouls and new strains of plant life adapted to high radiation, while pre-existing wildlife either perished or mutated under the extreme environmental stress, creating ecosystems unrecognizable to those who had lived before the bombs, and simultaneously, House's foresight in integrating Robco automated defense systems, geothermal energy plants, and Securitron surveillance allowed him to endure the immediate aftermath without direct harm, preserving both the nucleus of the city and his own consciousness in a cryogenic and machine-assisted stasis. As the immediate post-war world settled, pockets of humanity struggled to survive in isolated vaults or improvised shelters, relying on stockpiled provisions, radiation-resistant infrastructure, and scavenged technology. Yet even these groups were limited in both number and knowledge, unaware of the larger devastation occurring across the continent, with entire states depopulated and borders effectively meaningless, while communication networks had been obliterated, rendering coordination between survivors nearly impossible. and fostering the conditions for tribalism, raiding, and the eventual rise of localized post-war societies. In the Mojave, the bombs created what would later be known as the Glowing Sea, a region of catastrophic radiation to the east, while the remains of Hoover Dam became a strategic and symbolic landmark due to its potential to generate electricity and control water flow, attracting the attention of future powers such as the New California Republic and Caesar's Legion centuries later, and demonstrating the strategic foresight House had incorporated into his long-term plans for Las Vegas as a self-sufficient bastion. Meanwhile, the immediate human toll was staggering, with estimates derived from pre-war census data and later archaeological surveys suggesting millions perished instantly, leaving ghost cities and skeletal remains scattered across the continent, and the psychological impact of the war became manifest in those few who survived, including the earliest ghouls, former humans whose prolonged exposure to radiation caused severe mutations and functional immortality, creating a living reminder of the human cost of technological hubris. The rapid collapse of societal order also triggered the failure of supply chains, leading to famine, disease, and further mortality in the months following, and those who ventured out of vaults or makeshift shelters encountered a landscape dominated by ruins, lawlessness, and the slow reclamation of land by radiation-resistant flora and fauna, with Las Vegas itself appearing as an improbable anomaly in the desert, largely intact due to House's intervention, its neon lights extinguished but its structures preserved, a testament to both human ingenuity and the fragility of civilization. And it was in this desolate environment that the seeds for the Mojave's eventual post-war society began to take root, as wandering survivors, small tribes, and early scavenger bands began to occupy the surrounding lands, establishing the foundations of the human settlements, trade routes, and power structures that would centuries later converge on the Strip, ultimately setting the stage for House's reawakening and the slow but deliberate rebirth of New Vegas as a center of power, commerce, and culture, demonstrating that even amid the total annihilation of human civilization, foresight, technology, and strategic planning could preserve not only structures, but also the potential for societal resurgence, leaving the Mojave as both a cautionary tale and a cradle of the future civilization that would eventually emerge under Robert House's calculated guidance. Following the cataclysm of the Great War, the Mojave Desert entered a period historians would later term the Long Silence, a centuries-long era in which human civilization beyond the surviving vaults, scattered settlements, and isolated tribes virtually ceased to function, leaving the region dominated by desolate landscapes, irradiated ruins, and the slow, relentless adaptation of both flora and fauna to a world transformed by atomic fire, where the skeletal remains of pre-war infrastructure, from highways and bridges to the ruins of Hoover Dam and the skeletal remnants of the Las Vegas Strip itself, stood as stark reminders of the technological and social achievements that had been abruptly extinguished. In this environment, Robert House's foresight and technological foresight ensured that the Lucky 38 and its subterranean systems remained operational, preserving both his consciousness in cybernetic stasis and the structural integrity of the city above. While the majority of the city, Mojave's human population, either perished immediately, succumbed to radiation and starvation in the following months, or retreated into vaults, bunkers, and other improvised shelters, many of which were small, isolated, and largely disconnected from one another, producing a fractured, almost feudal patchwork of survival, where communication was sporadic, commerce non-existent, and knowledge of pre-war society diminished to oral tradition and fragmented records. Over the next 2 centuries, the survivors of the Mojave and surrounding regions adapted in isolation, forming tribal cultures that scavenged from the remnants of pre-war technology and infrastructure, hunting mutated wildlife, developing crude governance structures, and often resorting to violence and raiding to maintain scarce resources, while the geography of the desert itself shifted under the influence of sandstorms, flash floods, and gradual erosion, further complicating movement and settlement and ensuring that even the Poe's closest vaults often remained unaware of one another's existence, leading to the creation of distinct dialects, cultural norms, and survival strategies, and giving rise to groups that would later become the major powers in the region, such as the remnants of the Khans, Caesar's emerging legion from the east, and the precursor communities that would form the new California Republic's western footholds. During this time, House's automated systems performed the silent, unseen work of preservation. Geothermal power maintained critical energy reserves, robotic maintenance units repaired structural degradation, sensors monitored environmental changes, and the Securitrons, though dormant for long periods, recorded patterns of movement in the surrounding desert, cataloging wildlife, human activity, and meteorological changes, effectively giving House a detailed awareness of his environment despite centuries of isolation, while the city above remained largely untouched by human interference. Its casinos, hotels, and infrastructure gradually succumbing to natural weathering, but remaining structurally sound, allowing House, upon his eventual reawakening, to reassert control without the need for major reconstruction, a scenario that would later define the speed and scope of New Vegas's rebirth. Concurrently, the Mojave's mutated ecosystems evolved in remarkable ways, with ghouls appearing as a product of radiation exposure on long-lived humans who survived near hotspots, the proliferation of irradiated flora creating pockets of new resources and hazards, and the establishment of dangerous mutant wildlife that would dominate the deserts, further limiting the expansion of human settlement and reinforcing the isolation of early survivor groups who developed oral histories, myths, and tribal codes to navigate this hazardous world, often attributing the survival of certain areas to divine or supernatural causes, while remaining oblivious to the fact that the preservation of the Strip was the result of House's precise technological engineering. Over these centuries, Las Vegas became a ghost city in popular memory among wandering Mojave tribes, a place whispered about in legend as cursed or haunted, where pre-war machinery moved on its own and the remnants of humanity's golden age still lingered, yet no group possessed the capacity to understand the true nature of House's work, and few dared to venture near the Strip until the very end of this period, when early scavengers, drawn by rumor of intact wealth, technology, and resources, began to probe its outer limits, triggering the first signs of activity that would eventually awaken the long-dormant systems, and setting the stage for House's re-emergence. Thus, the long silence was not merely a period of decay, but a crucible in which the Mojave's future was forged, where human societies became resilient yet primitive, wildlife and environment adapted to extremes, and the surviving technological marvels of Robco, under House's hidden stewardship, ensured that the Strip remained poised to serve as the foundation of New Vegas, an enduring testament to both human ambition and the singular foresight of Robert House. whose century-spanning planning had transformed a devastated desert into a future locus of civilization, commerce, and power in the post-apocalyptic world. After more than 2 centuries of dormancy, Robert House's systems beneath the Lucky 38 began to register significant activity in the Mojave, a phenomenon that historians would later identify as the catalyst for his reawakening, as wandering humans, scavengers, and early tribal settlers gradually approached the ruins of the Strip, triggering motion sensors, power grids, and surveillance arrays that had been silently maintained by geothermal energy and solar backup systems since the Great War. And as these systems accumulated sufficient data on environmental changes, human presence, and structural integrity, House's automated life support mechanisms initiated a sequence of reactivation protocols designed to restore his cognitive and physical functions, a process that, despite the centuries-long hiatus, successfully reintegrated his consciousness into a cybernetically sustained body, effectively transforming him from the mortal Robert Edwin House into the immortal, machine-supported entity known historically as Mr. House, whose awareness now encompassed both the city above and the surrounding Mojave, allowing him to perceive minute environmental fluctuations, analyze patterns of human movement, and anticipate future threats with a precision unmatched by any surviving human institution. This awakening was neither instantaneous nor without consequence, as the centuries of stasis required gradual reintroduction of neural activity, recalibration of artificial organs, and the reintegration of robotic sensory networks into his cognitive processes, a painstaking operation orchestrated entirely by the pre-programmed safeguards and redundancies he had installed prior to the Great War, reflecting his singular foresight and mastery of robotics and cybernetics, and ensuring that his mind emerged fully intact, free from the cognitive decay that would have been inevitable had he relied solely on biological preservation. Upon gaining full operational capacity, House immediately assessed the Mojave landscape, mapping the locations of surviving human settlements, evaluating the distribution and condition of pre-war structures, and cataloging radiation levels and mutated wildlife populations, all while simultaneously activating the Securitron army stored beneath the Lucky 38 and initiating maintenance protocols for the city's power, water, and climate systems, effectively restoring the Strip to a state of operational readiness centuries before its inhabitants would fully understand or interact with it, and creating a controlled environment in which House could implement his vision for the restoration of civilization. In the decades that followed, House methodically began to exert influence over the surrounding region by selectively reintroducing humans to his orbit, offering opportunities for trade, employment, and protection in exchange for loyalty and compliance, and carefully structuring the social and political systems that would give rise to the 3 families, the chairman, omertas, and White Glove Society, who became the intermediaries and administrators of his renewed city, each faction reformed and organized according to principles House deemed optimal for maintaining stability, security, and economic prosperity, blending remnants of pre-war culture with the needs of a post-apocalyptic society, and ensuring that the Strip functioned not merely as a surviving city, but as a model of controlled civilization. Simultaneously, House re-established strategic oversight over the Mojave, using Securitrons and surveillance networks to monitor trade routes, resource distribution, and the movements of tribes and other emerging powers, including the early expansion of the new California Republic from the west and the formation of Caesar's legion from the east, calculating probabilities of conflict, alliance, and economic opportunity, and developing contingency plans for every conceivable outcome, all while remaining physically isolated. Within the Lucky 38, a detached but omnipotent figure whose intellect and foresight allowed him to manipulate events across the desert without direct confrontation. Through this process, House's awakening did not merely signify the return of a single individual, but represented the operational rebirth of New Vegas itself, transforming a long-dormant city of ruins into a functional hub of governance, commerce, and security, capable of projecting influence across the Mojave despite the region's chaos, and cementing House's role as both architect and arbiter of post-apocalyptic civilization in the Western Desert, a position that would shape the events of the Mojave for decades to come, and define the very nature of the Strip as a locus of technological, social, and political authority in a world otherwise dominated by ruin, mutation, and survivalist pragmatism, illustrating the unprecedented impact of foresight, planning, and technological mastery in a post-nuclear environment, and establishing Mr. House not merely as a survivor of the Great War, but as the singular force capable of directing the rebirth of a civilization from the ashes of its own annihilation. Following the reawakening of Robert House, one of his first and most consequential undertakings was the reorganization of Las Vegas into a functional, social, and economic ecosystem capable of sustaining his vision of controlled civilization, and central to this strategy was the establishment of the three families, a tripartite structure composed of the chairman, the omertas, and the White Glove Society, each selected and reformed to fulfill specific roles in maintaining order, commerce, and culture on the Strip. The chairman, originally a fragment of the pre-war Mojave tribes later associated with the remnants of the Khans, were transformed under House's guidance into the operators of the Tops Casino. Their prior tendencies toward nomadic raiding and opportunistic violence, harnessed and redirected toward performance, hospitality, and economic control, a process that involved both subtle cultural re-education and strategic employment of House's Securitrons to enforce discipline, ensuring that the chairman became charismatic yet compliant agents who could oversee the day-to-day operations of the Strip while maintaining the appearance of autonomy, allowing House to exercise indirect governance through loyalty, enforced by a combination of economic dependency, technological surveillance, and subtle coercion. The omertas, whose origins lay in pre-war criminal organizations and raiding bands of the Mojave, were assigned the administration of Gomorrah, a casino and entertainment complex modeled after organized crime syndicates of the Old World, where vice, gambling, and illicit activity were tolerated and even encouraged, so long as they contributed to the city's overall stability and revenue, with House employing a mixture of social engineering, contractual obligations, and threat projection via robotic enforcers to ensure compliance, transforming the omertas from violent opportunists into an institution that could manage risk, generate wealth, and provide a controlled outlet for human indulgence without allowing disorder to spread beyond their domain. The White Glove Society, descended from isolated desert tribes and survivors of pre-war social hierarchies who had developed cannibalistic and ritualistic practices during the centuries of the Long Silence, were integrated into House's system as both a symbol and an instrument of refined culture, occupying the Tops and Casino Royale with an emphasis on etiquette, ceremonial procedure, and exclusivity, their pre-war brutality obscured beneath layers of ritualized performance, luxury, and formality, serving as House's most visible demonstration of civilization restored, their presence reinforcing the illusion that the Strip had been resurrected in the image of pre-war high society, while in reality they operated under the strict surveillance and indirect command of House, their actions and culture carefully curated to project power and inspire awe. The creation of this tripartite structure allowed House to delegate authority across the city while maintaining ultimate control, a system in which Securitrons acted as both enforcers and observers, ensuring that deviation from prescribed behavior was met with immediate and precise correction, while simultaneously allowing each family to cultivate its own identity, history, and culture, which not only engaged human psychology, but also fostered competition, loyalty, and investment in the maintenance of the city, creating a dynamic ecosystem in which economic, social, and political stability were intertwined with the ongoing operation of casinos, hotels, and trade networks, all designed to reinforce House's vision of an immortal, self-sustaining urban environment in the Mojave. This carefully balanced order extended beyond the Strip itself, as House used the families to manage interactions with the surrounding settlements, negotiate with trading caravans, and monitor the growth of external powers such as the new California Republic and the nascent Caesar's Legion, ensuring that Las Vegas remained a hub of influence without direct military engagement, relying instead on economic dominance, technological superiority, and social engineering to maintain supremacy. And in doing so, he created a model of post-apocalyptic governance that blended elements of pre-war capitalism, aristocratic oversight, and totalitarian control, all mediated through human intermediaries whose loyalty was continually reinforced by material incentive, fear, and the subtle manipulation of ambition, a system that allowed the Strip to flourish despite the surrounding chaos of the Mojave. The three families thus represented more than mere administrative divisions. They were instruments of civilization rebuilt under House's guidance, each embodying aspects of human society, leadership, commerce, culture, and morality that had survived the Great War in fragmentary form, now recombined under the control of a single, immortal mind. And through their existence, House ensured that Las Vegas would not only survive but thrive, becoming a beacon of order, wealth, and spectacle in a desert defined by ruin, mutation, and scarcity, laying the foundation for the complex political, economic, and military landscape that would define the Mojave for decades to come, and ultimately demonstrating that in the post-apocalyptic world, foresight, strategic planning, and technological mastery could preserve civilization in miniature, with the Strip serving as both a microcosm of humanity and the enduring monument to the vision of Robert House. By the time Robert House had fully reasserted control over Las Vegas, through the establishment of the three families and the reactivation of his Securitron network, the wider Mojave Desert had already begun to develop into a complex and contested post-apocalyptic landscape, a mosaic of human settlements, wandering tribes, and nascent political entities whose interactions would ultimately set the stage for the conflict surrounding New Vegas, and whose existence reflected the consequences of centuries of survival amid radiation, resource scarcity, and fragmented knowledge of the pre-war world. To the west, the new California Republic, emerging from the relative stability of the coastal and inland regions of the former state of California, was expanding eastward, guided by principles of democratic governance, law, and bureaucracy, seeking to bring order to territories largely devoid of formal political authority, and motivated both by the acquisition of resources, particularly access to water, arable land, and functional pre-war infrastructure, and by strategic ambition, aiming to secure the Mojave as a corridor linking their eastern territories to the critical hydroelectric power of Hoover Dam to the east. The foundations of what would become Caesar's Legion were forming under the leadership of Edward Sallow, a former tribal figure and student of history who had reorganized surviving desert tribes into a highly disciplined, militarized, and brutal society modeled explicitly on Roman imperial structures, with enslaved populations, ritualized warfare, and strict hierarchy, creating a stark ideological contrast to the republican and commercial ambitions of the NCR, and ensuring that any expansion westward would be met by an uncompromising and ruthless opponent. The Mojave's indigenous and semi-nomadic tribes, many of which were descendants of pre-war survivors and vault dwellers who had wandered the desert during the Long Silence, occupied the terrain between these emerging powers, subsisting through hunting, scavenging, and raiding, maintaining oral histories, primitive technologies, and fragmented knowledge of pre-war cities, while avoiding, when possible, the forces of both NCR expansion and Legion consolidation, yet inevitably encountering them as these political entities sought to dominate the region. Scattered settlements such as Prim, Novak, and Good Springs served as microcosms of human adaptation, where survivors rebuilt rudimentary infrastructures, scavenged pre-war technologies, and established governance structures ranging from informal councils to autocratic leadership, often relying on barter economies centered around caps, water, and salvage technology. And these towns became crucial waypoints and strategic hubs, providing intelligence, labor, and supplies for larger forces operating in the Mojave, including House's eventual interests in controlling trade routes and asserting dominance over the flow of goods into and out of the Strip. Environmental conditions further complicated these developments, as the Mojave remained a harsh desert ecosystem where extreme temperatures, scarce water, and irradiated zones limited long-distance travel and concentrated human activity around riverbeds, springs, and the remnants of pre-war reservoirs, creating natural choke points that would later serve as military and economic leverage, while also fostering unique mutated wildlife, including rad scorpions, geckos, and other species that posed constant threats to travelers and settlements alike, shaping human behavior, settlement patterns, and survival strategies across the region. The presence of the Strip itself, though largely dormant to outsiders, exerted a subtle gravitational influence, both symbolic and practical, as pre-war wealth, structures, and rumors of functioning technology created a magnet for exploration, trade, and eventual conflict, and House's Securitron network monitored this activity meticulously, cataloging the growth of human movement, commerce, and military capability, allowing him to anticipate threats and opportunities, and to manipulate outcomes to his advantage without direct confrontation. The Mojave's transportation networks, largely fragmented but including remnants of highways, railroads, and pre-war service routes, became critical arteries for both the NCR and Caesar's Legion, enabling the movement of troops, supplies, and information, and ensuring that control of strategic locations, such as Hoover Dam, the Bitter Springs area, and key desert passes would determine the balance of power, while isolated oases, vaults, and outposts acted as points of contention and negotiation for resources, information, and alliances. In this context, House's New Vegas operated as both a sanctuary and a center of influence, where wealth, technology, and controlled governance projected power outward into the Mojave, shaping the emerging political landscape while remaining insulated from the volatility and violence of surrounding territories, and creating a scenario in which the Strip's prosperity, security, and social order were maintained through a delicate balance of economic incentive, surveillance, and the calculated deployment of force via Securitrons and the Three Families. As a result, by the late 272nd, the Mojave was a region of competing ideologies and emerging powers, a dynamic theater where human ambition, survival imperatives, and technological advantage would intersect, setting the stage for the inevitable confrontation over the control of Las Vegas, its resources, and the hydroelectric lifeblood of Hoover Dam, and demonstrating that even centuries after the Great War, the deserts of Nevada were no longer simply a place of ruin, but a strategic crucible in which the forces of order, commerce, and tyranny would collide, with New Vegas at the center as both prize and arbiter, embodying the enduring vision of Robert House and the broader struggle to restore, dominate, and survive civilization in a fractured post-apocalyptic world. By the mid-272nd, the new California Republic, having emerged from the relative stability and organizational coherence of the post-war remnants in California, began extending its influence eastward across the Mojave Desert, motivated by both the desire to secure valuable resources and infrastructure and the ideological imperative to spread Republican governance, law, and order to territories largely devoid of centralized authority. The NCR's expansion was strategic and methodical, employing survey teams, engineers, and military detachments to identify key locations such as water sources, trade routes, and pre-war structures that could serve as fortified settlements, while simultaneously establishing a network of supply lines and communications that allowed their influence to radiate into otherwise lawless regions, reflecting a combination of military discipline and bureaucratic planning rarely seen in the post-apocalyptic world. Early outposts were constructed at locations including Bitter Springs, Nelson, and the edges of the Mojave, serving both as defensive positions against hostile tribes and raiders, and as centers for trade, intelligence gathering, and recruitment, while the NCR also made deliberate efforts to bring local communities under its protection, offering food, medical aid, and security in exchange for loyalty and allegiance, an approach that often placed them in tension with indigenous tribes who valued autonomy, and with emerging powers such as Caesar's Legion that relied on domination through force. Central to the NCR's strategy in the Mojave was the recognition of Hoover Dam's strategic importance for the hydroelectric power it could provide, and the control over water distribution it conferred, which would not only secure their settlements and industrial activities, but also provide a decisive advantage in any future military conflict. And thus, NCR engineers and military planners began the careful work of assessing the dam's operational capacity, repairing critical systems, and establishing a military presence that could both defend and utilize the facility without relying on pre-existing infrastructure that might be compromised, while simultaneously creating a symbolic claim to legitimacy in the eyes of both local populations and rival factions. The NCR's expansion was not uncontested, as raiding parties, independent settlements, and the Far Eastern forces that would later coalesce into Caesar's Legion presented continual challenges, requiring a combination of diplomacy, trade, and limited military engagement to maintain momentum. Yet the NCR's methodical application of law, currency, and civic structure allowed them to extend influence with relatively minimal bloodshed compared to the chaotic violence typical of the Mojave, while simultaneously establishing a foundation for taxation, infrastructure repair, and long-term territorial claims, and creating corridors of relative safety that encouraged migration, commerce, and communication. Trade routes became arteries of both economic and military significance, connecting outposts, mines, and water sources across the desert, while caravans, merchants, and NCR-affiliated settlers carried goods, information, and manpower, reinforcing the Republic's presence and allowing for rapid mobilization in response to threats, whether from hostile humans, raiders, or environmental hazards such as irradiated zones and desert storms. Hoover Dam, in particular, represented both an opportunity and a point of friction, as its control promised energy, irrigation, and political leverage, and the NCR's presence there allowed them to negotiate with, monitor, or challenge other powers moving into the Mojave, including Robert House's New Vegas and its autonomous, technologically enforced dominion, which remained officially neutral but of strategic concern, while the Republic also invested in mapping the surrounding terrain, fortifying river crossings, and constructing relay stations to project authority far beyond their immediate settlements. This deliberate and sustained expansion reshaped the human geography of the Mojave, linking scattered settlements into a coherent network of influence and protection, allowing the NCR to project governance across previously lawless territory, and setting the stage for future conflicts with Caesar's Legion and the assertion of House's authority over the Strip, while simultaneously embedding Republican ideology, legal systems, and infrastructure in a region still recovering from the devastation of the Great War, demonstrating that even in the harsh, irradiated, and chaotic post-apocalyptic environment, organized states could emerge, extend influence, and compete for resources, power, and legitimacy. And by the late 272nd, the NCR had established a foothold in the Mojave that would make it the principal Western power in the region, a force whose march toward Hoover Dam and the Strip would ultimately define the balance of power in the coming wars over New Vegas and the fate of the Mojave as a whole. The First Battle of Hoover Dam, fought in the late 272nd, represented the initial major confrontation between the expansionist New California Republic and the emergent Caesar's Legion for control of the Mojave, centered on the strategic, economic, and symbolic significance of the dam itself, which not only provided hydroelectric power and control over water distribution, but also served as a vital linchpin in regional trade routes, supply lines, and political influence, making it an indispensable objective for both factions and a microcosm of the broader struggle for dominance in the post-apocalyptic Southwest. The NCR, seeking to secure its eastern expansion and ensure the survival and prosperity of its settlements, established a heavily fortified encampment on the western approaches to the dam, deploying infantry, armored vehicles, and engineering units tasked with defending the facility, while simultaneously maintaining the flow of resources to its settlements, and implemented a system of command and logistics that reflected its pre-war military doctrine adapted to the harsh and fragmented desert environment, ensuring supply chains, medical support, and communication lines were robust despite frequent raids by hostile tribes and Legion scouts. Caesar's Legion, led by the charismatic and ruthlessly pragmatic Caesar, approached the dam from the east, bringing with them a force organized along militarized tribal lines but disciplined with Roman-inspired structure, emphasizing shock tactics, psychological intimidation, and strict hierarchical obedience, exploiting both mobility and ruthlessness to challenge the NCR's numerical and technological advantages, using the terrain, night raids, and rapid flanking maneuvers to attempt to overwhelm positions and sever supply routes, while relying on intimidation and fear to destabilize NCR-aligned settlements in the surrounding Mojave, thereby reducing the Western faction's capacity to reinforce the dam directly. The battle unfolded over multiple days and nights, characterized by a mixture of conventional engagement and guerrilla tactics, with legionaries attempting to breach NCR fortifications through frontal assaults, diversionary attacks, and the targeting of weak points identified through intelligence gathered from captured scouts and sympathetic local informants, while NCR forces responded with a combination of entrenched defenses, sniper placements, automated turrets, and coordinated counterattacks that leveraged their superior firearms, pre-war technology, and disciplined formations, creating a protracted and bloody struggle that tested both sides' capacity for sustained operations in the unforgiving desert environment, where heat, sandstorms, and scarcity of water and medical supplies compounded the human cost. Mr. House, observing the conflict from the vantage of the Lucky 38 and his integrated Securitron network, remained a silent but decisive actor, subtly manipulating the battle by controlling automated systems, directing Securitrons to strategic positions, and selectively providing intelligence that could tip the balance in favor of outcomes conducive to the preservation of the Strip and his long-term vision, all without exposing himself to direct engagement, effectively ensuring that the dam's status and surrounding territories did not destabilize in a manner that could threaten New Vegas or his carefully constructed social order, and demonstrating the unique role that advanced pre-war technology could play in post-apocalyptic geopolitics. By the conclusion of the battle, the NCR succeeded in maintaining operational control over the western approaches to Hoover Dam and secured the facility against full Legion occupation, though at great human cost, with thousands of casualties on both sides and extensive damage to infrastructure, illustrating the deadly stakes of regional supremacy in the Mojave and foreshadowing the continuing conflict that would culminate decades later in further confrontations for control of the dam, the Strip, and the surrounding desert territories, while Caesar's Legion was forced to retreat and consolidate its eastern holdings, preserving its strength for future campaigns, and the battle cemented Hoover Dam as the critical prize and enduring flashpoint in the struggle between expanding civilizations and militarized desert powers, solidifying the strategic calculus that would dominate the Mojave throughout the late 272nd and beyond, and confirming that New Vegas, under Mr. House's silent guidance, remained at the center of the desert's geopolitical landscape, a prize worth contesting, protected not only by human alliances, but by the unseen technological reach of a pre-war genius who had planned centuries in advance. Following Robert House's meticulous reactivation of Las Vegas, the Strip emerged from centuries of desolation into a vibrant, technologically controlled urban center that represented both the continuity of pre-war civilization and the unprecedented reconstruction of a post-apocalyptic city, as House utilized the infrastructure of the Lucky 38, the Securitron Army, and his network of automated systems to restore essential services, enforce security, and regulate commerce, while simultaneously establishing a social hierarchy and governance framework that relied on the three families, the chairman, the emertors, and the White Glove Society, to manage the city's economic, cultural, and criminal activities, ensuring that New Vegas would operate efficiently without requiring direct oversight in every instance, and allowing House to project power outward into the Mojave while maintaining absolute control over the urban core. The reopening of casinos, hotels, and entertainment venues symbolized both the restoration of prosperity and the psychological resurrection of human culture amid the ruins, attracting wandering survivors, scavengers, and entrepreneurs from across the desert, who brought with them both the remnants of pre-war knowledge and the adaptive ingenuity of generations hardened by survival, and whose labor, skills, and interactions were carefully monitored and subtly guided by House's systems to maintain stability, productivity, and profitability, transforming New Vegas into a center of wealth, spectacle, and controlled chaos. Infrastructure upgrades included the integration of autonomous power grids fed by fusion and geothermal sources, advanced water purification systems, and redundant climate control, which not only ensured habitability but also provided House with leverage over the surrounding settlements and trade networks, allowing him to influence the Mojave without exposing the Strip to external threats, while Securitrons patrolled streets, monitored key locations, and acted as both law enforcement and military deterrent, creating a pervasive sense of order and authority that discouraged rebellion, crime beyond controlled parameters, and outside interference. Politically, House cultivated the appearance of independence and choice, allowing the three families to exercise apparent autonomy while embedding mechanisms of accountability and coercion, such as surveillance, economic dependency, and subtle enforcement, ensuring loyalty, while enabling social dynamics that encouraged ambition, competition, and engagement, fostering a society that could self-regulate while remaining under the invisible hand of House, and demonstrating a profound understanding of human behavior and the importance of indirect governance in achieving sustainable control. Culturally, the Strip became a microcosm of pre-war civilization merged with post-apocalyptic pragmatism, with architecture, entertainment, and fashion blending nostalgia and modern utility, while rituals of commerce, gambling, and social display reinforced House's vision of civilization as both spectacle and mechanism, teaching inhabitants the value of obedience, ambition, and spectacle, and instilling in visitors a perception of New Vegas as a city reborn from ruin, simultaneously familiar and otherworldly, alive and impervious. The city also functioned as a hub for trade and diplomacy with external powers, including the NCR, Caesar's Legion, and independent caravans, positioning New Vegas as both an economic powerhouse and a center of intelligence gathering, as House's strategic foresight allowed him to anticipate threats, broker temporary alliances, and manipulate outcomes without direct engagement, leveraging both wealth and technology to maintain dominance in the region. By the late 2000, 270 seconds, and early 2000, 280 seconds, the Strip had achieved a level of stability, prosperity, and sophistication unprecedented in the post-war Mojave, serving as a living testament to House's vision, technological mastery, and social engineering, and functioning simultaneously as a safe haven for commerce, a stage for human ambition, and a bastion of order in a desert otherwise defined by chaos, scarcity, and conflict, establishing New Vegas as the ultimate expression of pre-war ingenuity adapted to post-apocalyptic reality, a city where history, ambition, and technology intersected under the guiding hand of one man whose foresight allowed civilization to persist, thrive, and project influence even centuries after humanity's near extinction. Amid the fragile stability of New Vegas and the surrounding Mojave, the emergence of the platinum chip represented a pivotal technological and political turning point. As the device, an advanced pre-war Robco prototype containing critical upgrades for the Securitron network, embodied the convergence of House's long-term vision for the Strip, his desire for autonomous technological superiority, and the potential for external actors to influence the balance of power in the desert, and its loss and subsequent recovery would place a single individual, the Courier, at the center of history, thrusting an otherwise ordinary operative into the complex interplay of human ambition, loyalty, and post-apocalyptic geopolitics, thereby illustrating the critical role of individuals in shaping macro-level events, even in a world dominated by pre-war systems and strategic planning. The platinum chip, encoded with the means to expand House's Securitron army, from the confines of the Lucky 38 to citywide deployment and external defense, offered not only enhanced security, but also the potential to extend House's influence far beyond New Vegas, effectively transforming the Strip into a militarized city-state capable of asserting its autonomy against both the new California Republic and Caesar's Legion, and providing leverage in negotiations with tribal settlements, merchant caravans, and other minor factions scattered across the Mojave, making the device a central focal point in the contest for regional supremacy. The Courier, a figure whose name would come to be recognized as both a savior and a variable agent in Mojave politics, became the unwitting custodian of this technology, initially tasked with delivering it across treacherous terrain from New Vegas to distant locations, navigating the perils of irradiated zones, raiders, and mutated wildlife, while simultaneously encountering moral and political dilemmas that reflected the fragmented and often brutal human landscape of the Mojave, and whose decisions regarding the chip's ultimate disposition would directly determine the fate of House, the Strip, and the balance of power between the NCR and Caesar's Legion. House himself, maintaining his typical pattern of calculated foresight and subtle manipulation, monitored the chip's movement through surveillance and intelligence networks, guiding the Courier toward outcomes favorable to his long-term plan without direct interference, demonstrating both the precision of pre-war technology and the strategic acumen required to maintain dominance in a landscape where human agency could introduce unpredictable variables, and highlighting the interdependence between technology, individual action, and centralized authority in the reconstruction of civilization. Simultaneously, the presence of the platinum chip attracted attention from competing factions, each with their own interests and interpretations of its potential value. including the NCR, which viewed the device as a strategic asset capable of consolidating control over New Vegas and the Dam, Caesar's Legion, which recognized the threat it posed to their eastern expansion and the symbolic dominance of House, and opportunistic mercenaries, raiders, and minor factions seeking personal gain, thereby introducing layers of negotiation, subterfuge, and conflict that complicated the Courier's mission and underscored the high stakes of technological control in a world still recovering from nuclear annihilation. As the Courier traversed the Mojave, the journey itself became a microcosm of the broader historical and political forces shaping the desert, with each encounter, choice, and alliance reflecting the enduring tensions between human ambition, survival, and the rediscovery of pre-war technology, while the chip's function, the ability to upgrade, deploy, and ultimately command the Securitron network, represented the tangible realization of House's centuries-old vision, bridging the gap between the meticulous planning of one man and the unpredictable currents of human agency, and demonstrating that even in a post-apocalyptic environment, the introduction of a single technological artifact could recalibrate power structures, inspire loyalty, provoke conflict, and determine the trajectory of civilization. Ultimately, the Platinum chip and the Courier's role in its delivery crystallized the intersection of strategy, technology, and individual action, serving as both a narrative and historical linchpin in the ongoing reconstruction of the Mojave, illustrating that the survival and expansion of New Vegas under House's guidance was contingent not only on pre-war foresight and automated control, but also on human initiative, adaptability, and the unpredictable interplay of choice and circumstance, marking a definitive chapter in the history of the Strip, where the future of post-war civilization hinged upon a singular journey through the irradiated deserts and contested territories of the Mojave. The Second Battle of Hoover Dam, occurring in the year 2281, represented the culmination of decades of political tension, territorial expansion, and the strategic contest between the new California Republic, Caesar's Legion, and Robert House's New Vegas, with the dam itself serving as both the literal and symbolic center of power in the Mojave Desert, providing critical hydroelectric energy, control of water distribution, and the capacity to influence trade, military logistics, and settlement sustainability across the region, making it the decisive objective for all parties, and the stage upon which the post-apocalyptic history of the Southwest would be determined. The new California Republic, emboldened by decades of expansion, now sought to secure Hoover Dam fully, ensuring a permanent Western foothold in the Mojave and enabling them to extend Republican governance, economic control, and infrastructure into previously contested territories, deploying well-equipped troops, armored units, artillery, and logistical support along coordinated supply lines, while leveraging pre-war intelligence, desert maps, and reconnaissance to counter both the unpredictable tactics of Caesar's Legion and the technological superiority of House's autonomous defenses, reflecting a sophisticated integration of pre-war military doctrine adapted to the extreme environmental and geopolitical conditions of the post-nuclear desert. Caesar's Legion, motivated by both ideological conquest and the tactical necessity of controlling resources, advanced from the east with a disciplined, fanatically loyal military force organized along Roman-inspired hierarchies, employing brutal shock tactics, psychological warfare, forced conscription of enslaved populations, and the exploitation of terrain to disrupt NCR supply lines, weaken fortifications, and destabilize the morale of opposing forces, demonstrating the Legion's combination of ruthlessness, strategic organization, and adaptability in the Mojave environment, which allowed them to threaten even technologically superior adversaries with the sheer ferocity and cohesion of their ranks. Robert House, observing the escalation from the Lucky 38, deployed the Securitron network as both a defensive and manipulative tool, reinforcing key positions around New Vegas and the dam, directing autonomous units to control access routes, monitor troop movements, and intervene selectively in engagements to ensure that the city remained secure while shaping the conflict to preserve his long-term strategic interests, illustrating the unprecedented impact of pre-war technology integrated with post-apocalyptic foresight, where a single actor could exert influence over battles involving thousands of combatants without exposing themselves to direct risk, and where automated systems, surveillance, and precise tactical intervention could tip the balance of a major military engagement. The battle itself was characterized by a combination of conventional engagements, ambushes, and coordinated strikes across multiple fronts, with NCR forces defending fortifications, artillery emplacements, and supply routes against the Legion's repeated attempts to breach defenses, while House's Securitrons maintained control over the city's periphery and key choke points, enabling rapid counterattacks, reconnaissance, and logistical support that proved decisive, as well as enforcing discipline among human forces whose training and morale were tested under extreme environmental stress, including intense desert heat, scarcity of water, irradiated zones, and the constant threat of disease and attrition, highlighting the multifaceted challenges of desert warfare in a post-nuclear landscape. The engagement was further complicated by the presence of neutral factions, independent mercenaries, and settlements whose allegiance could be influenced by strategic persuasion, intimidation, or economic incentive, as House and his intermediaries manipulated trade, access, and information to subtly shape outcomes in favor of the Strip, demonstrating the intersection of military power, diplomacy, and technological leverage in determining the course of events, and ensuring that the human and material cost of the conflict, while significant, did not imperil House's broader objectives of maintaining New Vegas as a stable, self-sufficient power. After days of sustained combat, attrition, and maneuver warfare, the NCR successfully secured Hoover Dam and the western approaches, repelling Caesar's Legion forces while suffering heavy casualties and structural damage to infrastructure, with House's interventions preventing the collapse of strategic positions and preserving the Strip's integrity, effectively ensuring that control of the dam and access to its resources would remain within a balance of power that allowed his continued influence over the Mojave without committing New Vegas to open war, and establishing a precedent for the strategic use of technology, diplomacy, and proxy control in post-apocalyptic conflicts, illustrating that even in a world defined by chaos, destruction, and resource scarcity, the combination of foresight, engineering, and carefully calibrated human intervention could decisively shape outcomes of large-scale military engagements, thereby securing Hoover Dam not merely as a physical asset, but as the pivotal instrument through which New Vegas, the NCR, and the Legion would contest the future of the Mojave Desert. The phrase, "the house always wins," encapsulates not merely a slogan, but the philosophy and strategic genius of Robert House, whose vision of post-war civilization extended far beyond mere survival into the orchestration of a sustainable, technologically mediated urban society capable of enduring and projecting power across the Mojave Desert for centuries, a vision realized through meticulous preparation, pre-war technological mastery, and the deployment of systems that integrated automation, surveillance, and social engineering, reflecting his unique capacity to anticipate both human behavior and environmental contingencies in a post-apocalyptic landscape, and demonstrating that true control in such a fragmented world required a synthesis of foresight, infrastructure, and human management, rather than reliance solely on brute force or political coercion. Central to House's philosophy was the notion of immortality, not in the biological sense alone, though his cybernetic preservation ensured his consciousness endured across centuries, but in the enduring legacy of civilization he sought to construct, a city, New Vegas, that would operate as a living monument to pre-war ingenuity, human adaptability, and the triumph of strategic planning over chaos, where systems could maintain order, commerce, and security, independent of the fleeting lives of individuals, and where the manipulation of human ambition, loyalty, and desire through intermediaries such as the three families allowed him to maintain control without constant personal intervention, ensuring the continuity of his vision beyond the limitations of mortality. This vision extended to the technological realm through the Securitron network, an advanced infrastructure of the Strip, which embodied House's foresight in creating an adaptive, autonomous system capable of monitoring threats, enforcing law, regulating trade, and projecting influence far beyond the immediate confines of New Vegas, illustrating his belief that the integration of human and machine intelligence could compensate for the unpredictability of post-apocalyptic society, and that civilization could endure if guided by strategic calculation, technological mastery, and subtle manipulation of societal dynamics. House's philosophy also embraced the use of incentives, economic leverage, and social engineering, whereby human ambition, greed, and desire for status were harnessed to maintain order and compliance, creating a society in which individuals competed, cooperated, and thrived within the parameters he designed, while being guided subtly toward outcomes that served the broader continuity of New Vegas, demonstrating an unparalleled understanding of psychology, economics, and power dynamics in a world where traditional governance structures had largely collapsed, and where unmediated human ambition could lead to chaos, violence, and collapse. The immortality House sought was thus a fusion of technological endurance, social architecture, and environmental mastery, as he ensured that New Vegas would survive not only as a city, but as a system capable of enduring political pressures, military threats, and ecological challenges, a self-sustaining civilization in miniature that could project stability, wealth, and influence across the Mojave, and through which his vision of post-war society, technologically advanced, socially ordered, and strategically resilient, could persist long after the deaths of individual humans, including House himself. House's approach to immortality also involved calculated engagement with the broader regional powers, manipulating the NCR, Caesar's Legion, and independent actors through a combination of observation, selective intervention, and technological leverage, shaping the balance of power, in ways that ensured the Strip's primacy while minimizing direct conflict, reflecting a sophisticated strategy of indirect control that allowed him to win without exposing his assets or forces to unnecessary risk, thereby institutionalizing his authority and vision into the very infrastructure and social fabric of New Vegas. Ultimately, the statement, "The house always wins," is a testament to a philosophy in which foresight, technological mastery, and human engineering converge to transcend the limitations of mortality and chaos, where the careful orchestration of cities, armies, and economies ensures the perpetuation of order, the projection of influence, and the preservation of a vision across generations, exemplifying Robert House's belief that true power lies not in transient victories, but in the creation of enduring systems that survive, adapt, and dominate in a world that had otherwise been reduced to ruin. And in this context, New Vegas stands as both his monument and mechanism, the living embodiment of a vision of immortality that fused intellect, technology, and strategic governance into a civilization capable of persisting against the uncertainties of a post-apocalyptic wasteland, demonstrating that while empires may rise and fall, meticulously designed systems guided by foresight and control can ensure that, in a fundamental sense, the house indeed always wins. The concept of independent Vegas, often referred to as the free city of the wastes, represents the theoretical and practical manifestation of Robert House's vision for a post-apocalyptic city that could function autonomously amidst the political, economic, and military turbulence of the Mojave Desert, a city-state whose survival relied not on allegiance to external powers such as the New California Republic or Caesar's Legion, but on its own combination of technological superiority, social engineering, economic dominance, and strategic foresight, demonstrating the feasibility of sovereignty in a region otherwise dominated by competing factions and constant conflict. In this scenario, New Vegas functions as both an economic hub and a bastion of civilization, where the casinos, entertainment complexes, and restored urban infrastructure attract commerce, skilled labor, and cultural exchange from across the Mojave, while the Securitron network enforces security, law, and order, creating a controlled environment that allows human activity to flourish within parameters conducive to stability and profitability, illustrating that independence in the post-war environment depends as much on mastery of technology and resources as on political negotiation and force projection. House's control over the three families, the chairman, Omertus, and White Glove Society, remains central to the city's autonomous function, as each faction manages its own domains of commerce, enforcement, and culture, while remaining subordinated to House's strategic objectives, ensuring that loyalty, competition, and ambition are channeled toward the maintenance of a coherent urban system rather than devolving into unchecked conflict, thereby exemplifying the use of social engineering to sustain sovereignty in a post-apocalyptic society. The surrounding Mojave, populated by scattered settlements, NCR outposts, Legion encampments, and independent tribes, forms both a threat and a resource for independent Vegas, as the city must navigate trade, diplomacy, and potential military engagement with external powers, while leveraging its technological and economic advantages to negotiate favorable outcomes, control resource flows, and project influence, effectively demonstrating that independence is maintained not by isolation, but by careful integration into the regional network of commerce, intelligence, and military deterrence, with House serving as the central arbiter who coordinates these relationships to maximize strategic security and prosperity. Despite the stability within the city, independent Vegas remains inherently fragile, as external pressures from the NCR's territorial ambitions, Caesar's legion's expansionist campaigns, and the unpredictable actions of mercenaries, scavengers, and desert tribes continually threaten to disrupt the balance of power, making ongoing vigilance, technological adaptation, and strategic foresight essential to survival, and highlighting the delicate equilibrium that defines a city operating free from overarching state control in a post-nuclear environment. Culturally, independent Vegas embodies a fusion of pre-war nostalgia, post-apocalyptic pragmatism, and controlled spectacle, with rituals of commerce, entertainment, and social hierarchy reinforcing both civic cohesion and the perception of order, attracting migrants, entrepreneurs, and skilled workers while simultaneously maintaining strict surveillance and enforcement to prevent destabilizing influences, illustrating the complex interplay between liberty and control, freedom and authority that underpins the city's identity and survival. Economically, the city's independence is sustained through taxation, trade regulation, casino revenue, and strategic control of supply routes, particularly those connecting to Hoover Dam, which provides power and water critical to both urban prosperity and leverage over surrounding territories, ensuring that New Vegas can operate as a self-sufficient polity while retaining the capacity to influence regional developments, negotiate with external powers, and deter aggression through both technological might and economic interdependence. In totality, independent Vegas exemplifies a rare model of post-apocalyptic sovereignty, where a single actor, through foresight, technology, social manipulation, and strategic governance, can create a city capable of thriving autonomously, maintaining law, order, and prosperity amidst a landscape of chaos, scarcity, and conflict, demonstrating that the free city of the wastes is not merely a theoretical construct but a functioning entity whose very existence challenges assumptions about the viability of civilization in the wake of nuclear annihilation, and serving as a testament to Robert House's enduring vision, the adaptability of human ingenuity, and the potential for a post-war society to achieve autonomy, stability, and influence through careful orchestration of technology, economy, and human behavior, even in the most hostile and unpredictable environments. The legacy of the Strip, often described as civilization's last mirage, encapsulates the enduring significance of New Vegas as both a symbol and instrument of human resilience, technological mastery, and social engineering in a post-apocalyptic world. A city that arose from the ashes of pre-war society under the guidance of Robert House, whose vision combined foresight, automation, and strategic governance to create an urban environment capable of sustaining life, culture, and commerce centuries after the Great War, and whose existence demonstrates that even in a landscape dominated by scarcity, conflict, and environmental hazards, civilization can persist when human ingenuity, pre-war technology, and careful planning intersect. As the Mojave's geopolitical landscape evolved, marked by the expansion of the new California Republic, the rise of Caesar's legion, and the scattered survival of independent settlements, the Strip remained a constant, a locus of power, stability, and economic activity whose influence extended far beyond its physical boundaries, leveraging the wealth generated from casinos, trade, and controlled resource distribution to shape the behaviors, alliances, and ambitions of surrounding territories, effectively operating as both a city and a regional power whose authority derived from strategic foresight rather than brute military strength, illustrating the potential for technology and planning to substitute for conventional sovereignty in a fractured wasteland. Culturally, the Strip preserved a curated vision of pre-war society while adapting to post-apocalyptic realities, merging luxury, entertainment, and spectacle with social hierarchies enforced through the three families, the chairman, omertas, and white glove society, whose management of commerce, security, and ritualized human behavior exemplified House's approach to governance through indirect control, creating a society in which human ambition, desire, and competition were harnessed to reinforce stability and prosperity, while simultaneously providing an illusion of autonomy and choice, and demonstrating the enduring relevance of social engineering in shaping post-war communities. The technological infrastructure of the Strip, centered on the Lucky 38 and the Securitron network, functioned as both shield and mechanism of influence, controlling security, trade, and urban life, enabling New Vegas to survive external threats, manipulate regional power dynamics, and maintain internal order despite the unpredictable actions of NCR forces, Legion raiders, mercenaries, and independent actors, underscoring the strategic advantage conferred by automated systems, pre-war engineering, and meticulous planning, and revealing that in a world defined by chaos, a single well-designed urban ecosystem could become a fulcrum of power and civilization. In its broader historical context, the Strip's legacy lies not only in its survival, but in its role as a proving ground for governance, commerce, and diplomacy in the wasteland, where the interplay of technology, human agency, and strategic foresight determined outcomes that would ripple across the Mojave, influencing settlement patterns, trade networks, military campaigns, and cultural development, and serving as a model for what post-war civilization could achieve when guided by vision, discipline, and foresight, rather than leaving survival to chance or the vagaries of uncoordinated human endeavor. Ultimately, the Strip endures as a symbol of civilization's potential to reclaim, sustain, and project order in an environment seemingly defined by ruin and anarchy, a tangible demonstration of humanity's capacity to adapt, innovate, and exert control over both social and technological systems, while simultaneously functioning as a mirror reflecting the fragility, ambition, and ingenuity of human society, and providing a historical lesson that even in the wake of nuclear devastation, carefully orchestrated urban planning, technological mastery, and social engineering can create enduring bastions of civilization whose influence and legacy persist far beyond the lifespans of any single generation, marking New Vegas not merely as a city but as the final, enduring mirage of a lost world and the last testament to the potential of humanity to rise from the ashes of its own annihilation.